Alright, so this is a video key for the geometric proofs day 1 homework that you were given. And during this video key, I'm going to be using the reference table of proofs, or the cheat sheet of proofs that I gave you in class. So you might want to take that out or keep it handy, because we are going to be using it to get the answers to our questions. Let's get started. So on the first part, we want to use this diagram to identify the property, postulate, or theorem that justifies each statement in items 51 through 55. Let's look at 51. 51 says PQ plus QR equals PR. So I'm going to find PQ on this diagram. PQ plus QR. QR is equal to PR. Here's P and here's R. Alright, so let's see which answer choice would be the correct property to identify or justify this statement. A says angle addition postulate. Now, as I'm looking at this, we didn't reference or we didn't point to any angles, so I for sure know it's not A. I also am pretty sure it's not C, because the definition of congruent segments in our given, nowhere did it mention a midpoint or a bisector, and we know both of those cut objects in half, or line segments and lines in half. So I for sure know it's not definition of congruent segments, because they didn't give us that information. So we're left with B and D. Now B, the addition property, we usually only use that if we're adding numbers, not figures. So I'm going to knock out B as well. And I'm going to give it to letter choice D. And that is the segment addition postulate. And if you look at your the reference table at the segment addition postulate, that postulate says that AB plus BC plus CD equals AD. And that's kind of like what we did in this number 51. We gave the smaller segments to equal the larger segment. So again, the correct answer choice was D, segment addition postulate. Let's move on to number 52. If Q is the midpoint of line segment PR, then line segment PQ is congruent to line segment QR. So they're telling us that Q is the midpoint, so I'm going to go ahead and label that information. And we know the midpoint means that one half is equal to the other half. Alright, so they're telling us that Q is the midpoint of PR. So since it's the midpoint of PR, then that must mean that PQ is congruent to QR. So I'm going to go ahead and put my little marks there to show that congruency. Now, just based on that information, the fact that they gave us a midpoint, I'm going to say that it is the correct answer choice is A, the definition of a midpoint. And if you go to that on the reference chart, the definition of a midpoint, says that XY is congruent to YZ, and that's exactly like the statement they gave us in number 52. Okay, so we're going to say A, definition of a midpoint, is our answer. Alright, number 53. Angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. Angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. Now here's angle 3 and here's angle 4, and they're telling us that they are congruent. So just based on their location, I can tell right now that they're not a linear pair, because linear pairs have to be side by side. So it's not a linear pair. Okay. Definition of congruent angles. I'm going to say no on that one, because if you look at the definition of congruent angles, the definition has to include two different angles. And since angle 3 and angle 4 are in the same diagram, I'm going to say no to the definition of congruent angles. I am going to say yes to letter choice C. And the reason I'm going to say yes to letter choice C is because 3 and 4, since they're opposite like that from each other, they're vertical angles. And if you go to our reference table, the definition of vertical angles, they have a picture of two vertical angles. And vertical angles are across from each other. Alright? So we're going to say it's C, vertical angles are congruent. Again, it's not a linear pair, because linear pairs have to be right next to each other. So 3 and 2 are a linear pair, 2 and 1. So they have to be, like I said, right next door to each other to be linear. And these are not linear. 3 and 4 are vertical angles. Number 54. If Angle 1 is complementary, and remember complementary, the way we remember the difference between complementary and supplementary is complementary starts with the C and supplementary starts with an S. So for the complementary, we make the C into a 9 for 90, and for the supplementary, we make the S into an 8 for 180. Alright, so complementary, 90. So angle 1 is complementary to angle 2, then the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 equals 9 degrees. And we can go straight down to letter choice D. That's based on the definition of complementary angles. Alright, last one, number 55. If the measure of angle 3 is 90 degrees, then angle 3 is a right angle. And we know that's one of the first definitions we learned in geometry. A right angle is always equal to 90 degrees. And that's on the definition of a right angle. Letter choice C. Alright, let's go ahead and flip to the back. Alright, so on the back side of the paper we have a justification bank to choose from. But I'm just going to go ahead and reference the table that I gave you in class to get my answers from. Okay, so I can move the paper up. Alright, so we need to write a justification for each step. So given angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary. Again, remember the way we know supplementary starts with the letter S, and we can turn the S into an 8 for 180 degrees. And angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. So they told us that angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary, and that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. Number 1. Angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary, and angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. That was our given. Number 2. The measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 is equal to 180 degrees. That we got from the definition of supplementary angles. Number 3. The measure of angle 1 is equal to the measure of angle 3. That is based off the definition of congruent angles. Number 4. The measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 2 equals 180 degrees. I'm going to say that's based off the substitution property of equality. Last one. Angle 3 and angle 2 are supplementary, and that's based off the congruent supplements theorem. Alright, if you still have any questions, feel free to ask me before class or during flex time, but if not, I'll see you in class.